The first time I saw Jenna Lau, I forgot how to breathe. My pulse pounded in my temples as time slowed. It was the kind of moment you read about, the kind that makes your heart seize in your chest before hammering so hard you swear people can hear it. I was standing by my desk sipping coffee when she walked in, 5 foot nothing of sharp edges, wavy brown hair, and a glare that could set steel on fire. Love at first sight? More like a direct punch to the gut. Then she opened her mouth. Jenna Lau was smart, unbelievably competent, efficient to the point of terrifying. But God help me, she always looked like I had just asked her to step in a puddle of raw sewage. Every time I glanced up from my desk, she was either scowling, frowning, or pinching the bridge of her nose like I was personally responsible for every headache she'd ever had. It wasn't fair. I was a great boss. Demanding, sure, but fair. I paid well. I didn't micromanage, and I even said please and thank you when most people in my position wouldn't bother. But nothing I did seemed to change the fact that Jenna looked like she regretted every life choice that had brought her within 10 feet of me. This woman hated me with every fiber of her being. She never spoke out of turn, never disrespected me outright, but I could feel it in the air between us. An electric current of disapproval, a silent judgment hovering over my every decision. When I handed her files, she'd take them like I'd just given her a dead rat. When I asked for an update, she'd give it with precision, but also with the pained expression of someone suffering through an ordeal. And the worst part, she was too damn good at her job for me to even be mad about it. Every morning, she'd stride into my office, heels clicking with authority, and I'd have to remind myself sternly that I was the boss, not her, me. But then she'd glance at me over the rim of her glasses, brows furrowing in what I could only assume was barely concealed disdain, and I'd feel my spine straighten on instinct, like I was a schoolboy about to get scolded. It drove me insane. Maybe she hated CEOs. Maybe she hated men in power. Maybe she just hated me. But damn it, I wanted to know why. Because for all her scowls and pointed sighs, she was the most captivating woman I'd ever met. And no matter how many times she looked at me like I was an absolute nuisance, I couldn't stop looking back. 2 weeks in, I found myself staying late in the office again, half buried under a mountain of reports and emails. The clock read 9:32 p.m. when I finally rubbed my eyes and stretched, rolling the stiffness from my shoulders. I expected silence, expected to be the last one in the building. But when I stepped outside my office, she was still there. My heart stuttered in my chest, the same thing that always happens whenever she's around. Jenna sitting at her desk, typing, scowling. "Why are you still here?" I asked her. She didn't look up. "Because you're still here." I frowned, my eyes flitting from her to the wall clock across from me. "Your work ends at 5. "Yes," she agreed, still typing. "But you're my boss." I leaned against the doorframe, studying her. She hadn't changed out of her crisp white blouse and pencil skirt, though her hair was slightly messier than it had been this morning. Had she been waiting for me this whole time? I didn't miss the fact that it was just her and me, alone on this floor. "Can I ask you something?" My voice came out quieter than I intended. Why the hell was I nervous, like I was about to step in front of a jury? I was a grown man, and her boss to boot, and yet a bead of sweat slid down my back despite the cool air. Jenna finally stopped typing, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as if bracing herself. "What? Why do you hate me? Am I that much of an awful boss?" For the first time since I'd met her, Jenna Lau looked stunned. She blinked, her brown eyes wide and uncertain. Her lips parted, but no words came out. And for the first time in 2 weeks, I saw something on her face that wasn't annoyance or disdain, hesitation, maybe even guilt. I took a step closer, my whole being hyper-aware of the distance between us. "Jenna?" She inhaled sharply, like she had just realized she wasn't alone in the room anymore. Then without another word, she stood, grabbed her bag, and walked out. leaving me staring after her, more confused than ever.
He noticed. That was the first thought that slammed into my brain as I stepped toward the elevator. Ethan Evers, 35 years old, over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered and far too handsome for my sanity, had actually noticed that I didn't like him. For 2 weeks, I had assumed he was either oblivious or didn't care. And yet, tonight, he confronted me. Oh my God. I nearly made it to the elevator when I stopped. Something inside me twisted, my stomach turning into knots. This wasn't fair. Not to him, not to me. I couldn't just rudely turn my back on my boss. That wasn't me. That wasn't how I was brought up. With a sigh, I turned around, my palms sweating, my heart thundering like it's about to jump out of my chest. He was still standing there, confusion clouding those sharp blue eyes under neatly styled black hair. How was he real? He looked like one of those guys you see on billboards. Ultra-hot men who didn't grace us mere mortals with their presence. Jenna? God, even his voice was perfect. A deep baritone that felt like butter on my skin. Taking a deep breath, I folded my arms, hoping my courage wouldn't leave me. The coffee shop downstairs. His brows furrowed. What? That's why I don't like you. I admitted haltingly, already starting to feel petty and stupid. 2 weeks ago, I saw you cut in line. You just walked past everyone like they didn't exist. For a moment, silence stretched between us. Then he blinked, and I saw the exact moment he remembered. Wait, you think I cut the line? I crossed my arms tighter. I saw you. I was there. His lips twitched, almost amused. As if he wasn't perfect enough, God had to add dimples. Ethan Evers had dimples. Why hadn't I noticed until now? Jenna, I wasn't getting coffee for myself. I frowned. What? There was an old woman behind me. He said patiently. She had a cane and looked like she could barely stand. I asked if she wanted to go ahead, but she waved me off, so I ordered her coffee while she sat down. I felt my stomach drop, mortified at myself. Oh. His smirk widened, his dimples deepening. Oh? Heat rushed to my face, and I wished the earth would swallow me whole. I might have misjudged. He leaned in slightly. So that's it? That's your issue? You don't hate me? I sighed, looking away, my cheeks and neck burning. Nope. Hate is too strong. Besides, you're still my boss. And? I bit my lip, hesitating before finally letting myself admit what I had stubbornly refused to acknowledge. And you are pretty nice to your employees, polite, and, well, not bad to look at. His grin was pure mischief. Not bad to look at. I groaned. Forget it. Good night, Mr. Evers. As I turned back toward the elevator, I heard his low chuckle behind me. Good night, Jenna. And despite myself, for the first time since stepping into this office and working for him, I smiled. Ethan was not bad to look at. On the contrary, I kept finding myself baffled at my inability to look past his rugged handsomeness and overall hotness, even as he rattled out orders after orders. No, wait. Especially as he gave me orders. If I didn't hate him on sight, okay, maybe dislike would be a better word. I would have been crushing real hard on him. Who am I kidding? I did have a crush on him and hated myself for it. But whatever. Him clearing the air spelled trouble for me because now I no longer had a reason not to like him. And boy, oh boy, what a mess it would be for me.
I never knew how jealous and possessive I could be, but there was a first time for everything. I noticed it first as a passing thought. George, one of my senior managers, lingering a little too long by Jenna's desk. At first, I brushed it off. He had every reason to be there. Files to submit, reports to discuss. But it was the way he hovered that set me on edge. The way he leaned in a little too close when he spoke to her. I didn't realize how punchable his face was until I saw that smarmy smile he threw Jenna's way. Then I saw it, his hand casually resting on her shoulder. That alone made my body tense, and I was already halfway out of my seat, but something else happened. Jenna flinched. It was subtle, but I saw it. I would have missed it had I not been looking closely at her. She pulled away, shifting in her seat as if trying to escape the unwanted touch. And just like that, I saw red. Before I even realized what I was doing, I was striding across the office, my pulse thundering in my ears. Every step I took, my fury built like a storm. By the time I reached them, I was seconds away from throwing a punch. Instead, I grabbed George by the shoulder, hard, my fingers digging into his flesh. He startled, turning to me with wide eyes. "Sir," I cut him off, my voice dangerously low. "The next time you go around harassing the women in this office, I'll fire you without a second thought." The entire office went silent. You could hear a pin drop. George's face paled. I didn't mean, I don't care what you meant." My grip tightened before I shoved his hand off Jenna's desk. "Get back to work. If you have any business on this floor, finish it in 5 minutes and leave. Or I will personally make you." He scrambled away without another word, face red with humiliation. I turned to Jenna. She was staring at me, eyes wide, lips parted slightly in shock. It was the wrong time for it, but my gaze dropped to her mouth and I noticed she wore a different shade of lipstick today. Darker, sexier. I liked it. "Are you okay?" I asked, softer now, trying to put a lid on my residual adrenaline rush and the desire building inside me. She nodded slowly, but I wasn't convinced. I knew what I saw. "He didn't." "No," she said quickly. "Just caught me off guard." I studied her for a long moment, my hands clenched at my sides, trying to suppress the lingering anger in my chest. "If he or anyone else ever bothers you again, you tell me." Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. "I can handle myself." I smirked, just a little. "I know you can, but now he knows I'll handle it too." Her lips twitched like she wanted to smile, but she rolled her eyes instead. "Possessive much?" I leaned in just enough that only she could hear me, noticing her breath hitch as I did. "You have no idea." Jenna sucked in a sharp breath, blush creeping along her freckled cheeks. Her eyes turned glassy, and she kept blinking rapidly. Even I was surprised I did what I did. I left her like that, and as I let the door close behind me, I realized with a pang that yes, I had no idea how possessive I was, and she wasn't even mine. At least not yet.
I shouldn't have found it hot. Ethan Evers had just grabbed another man by the shoulder and threatened to fire him in front of the entire office. That should have been alarming. That should have made me uneasy. But no, my traitorous brain decided that my normally calm, charming, annoyingly kind boss getting possessive and rough on my behalf was hot. I was still reeling, hyper-aware of the stunned silence in the office when Ethan turned to me and said, "Let's go." I blinked, still trying to make sense of my rioting emotions. "Where?" "Lunch." I glanced at the clock. But it's still 11. He smirked the smirk that made butterflies flutter in my belly. "I'm the boss, remember?" Murmurs spread around us as he led the way out, and I forced myself to walk normally instead of speed walking in embarrassment. This was not normal. This was not us. But the way my pulse pounded, the way I was still tingling from how he'd looked at me moments ago, said otherwise. Lunch turned out to be a surprisingly fun affair. Ethan took me to a quiet bistro a few blocks away, ordering for us both with an easy familiarity that I found frustratingly attractive. He didn't act like a high and mighty CEO. He was relaxed, teasing, leaning back in his chair with a grin that was far too smug for my liking. This didn't feel like lunch between a boss and his secretary. No, this was more like a date, and my heart seemed to be enjoying it. "You like throwing your position around, don't you?" I said, arching a brow as I sipped my iced tea. He chuckled. Only when it gets me what I want. And what did you want this time? His blue eyes flicked to mine, unreadable for a moment before the side of his mouth tilted upward. Lunch. I rolled my eyes. Abusing power for sandwiches. How scandalous. He leaned in slightly. You're one to talk. Didn't you know some of my managers have to brace themselves before approaching you? I gaped, almost choking on my own saliva. Excuse me? He grinned. You terrify them, Jenna. It's pretty entertaining to see these brilliant men who have been with me for years turn ghostly pale when you ask them to state their business with me. That's ridiculous. It's true. I've actually heard them drawing straws. I huffed, crossing my arms. That's their problem. It's a you problem if you don't want them hiding behind potted plants. Didn't you notice that none of them could look you in the eye? Despite myself, I laughed, shaking my head. Unbelievable. He watched me with something warm in his expression, and suddenly the teasing didn't feel so casual anymore. My stomach flipped, and I quickly looked away, focusing on my plate. This was dangerous. This was not normal. And yet, sitting there with him, laughing and bantering over an early lunch, nothing else felt so right.
I was falling, hard and fast. Every morning I looked forward to stepping into the office, just to see her. I'd find myself waiting impatiently for that familiar click of her heels, for the way she'd roll her eyes as she read off my schedule for the day. And damn it, half the time I wasn't even listening. I'd just watch her, completely absorbed in the way her lips moved, the way her brows furrowed when she reached something she disapproved of. She had so many little habits I couldn't stop noticing. The way she chewed on her pencil when she was deep in thought, the way her jaw clenched when she disagreed with something but held back from saying it outright, the way she always had a sharp comeback, a teasing remark, a challenge hidden in her words. It was infuriating. It was intoxicating, and I was screwed. Clearing my throat, I leaned back in my chair as she rattled off another item on my to-do list. Oh, and one more thing, I said, cutting her off mid-sentence. She narrowed her eyes. What? The charity gala this Saturday. You're coming with me. Her lips parted, then snapped shut. Excuse me, I smirked. I'm ordering you to take Friday off to shop for whatever you need. Use the company card. And text me the color of your dress so I can match my suit. She scoffed, crossing her arms. What if I wear hot pink? I shrugged. I don't have that in my closet, but I can rush order. Her mouth twitched like she was trying not to smile. Wait, this whole event, shouldn't you ask me first instead of just telling me? I grinned. I'm the boss, remember? She let out an exasperated sigh, shaking her head. Unbelievable. I just leaned back in my chair, watching her, completely and utterly gone for her.
I think he's in love with you, Allie said. I snorted, grabbing another dress off the rack. That's ridiculous, Allie. Allie crossed her arms, a knowing smile on her lips. Is it? Because from what you've told me, Ethan Evers doesn't just buy designer gowns for every secretary he employs. I rolled my eyes, pretending my heart didn't do a weird little flip at the mere mention of his name. He gave me the company card. It's not like he personally picked this out. He told you to text him the color so he could match his suit, she pointed out. That's boyfriend behavior. I waved her off and focused on the black satin gown in my hands. It was sleek, elegant, and paired with the sky-high heels I'd picked out, it made me feel different. Powerful. Maybe even beautiful. Someone worthy to stand beside Ethan. I'd never worn anything like it before, and part of me was excited. Ethan had only ever seen me in stiff business suits. What would he think when he saw me like this? Before I could dwell on it, my phone rang. Hey, Ethan's deep voice rumbled through the speaker. "I'm taking you and Allie to lunch." Allie grinned, mouthing, "Told you, lunch was a chaotic mix of teasing and embarrassment." Allie, of course, had no shame. "So, Ethan," she said casually, swirling her drink, "you realize my best friend is single, right?" I nearly choked on my water. "Allie," Ethan chuckled, far too entertained. "Oh, I'm well aware." Allie shot me a triumphant look. "And she's very hardworking, loyal, maybe even a little too cute when she's pretending she doesn't care about you." I groaned, covering my face. "I swear I will leave you here." Ethan leaned in slightly. "You'd have to go through me first." Allie let out a delighted laugh, and I could feel my entire face heating up. When we got home, I was still reeling. Allie flopped onto the couch, cackling like a witch. "He likes you." I scoffed, kicking off my heels, but my body warmed from the thought of having Ethan as more than my boss. "You're seeing things, Allie." "Am I?" "Because I see the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. The way he always finds reasons to be near you. And don't get me started on how he gets all broody whenever another guy talks to you, even if it's the waiter." I swallowed hard, refusing to acknowledge the warmth curling in my stomach. I didn't even want to think about it. Allie nudges my side with her elbow. "Do you like him?" The question stopped me. I thought of Ethan, the approachable boss who could turn into Hulk when someone came too close to me. The guy who could go from sweet to menacing and possessive in the space of a few seconds. I don't know, Al. That's quite a pause. I didn't answer, staring at the black dress still draped over the chair. There was no way she was right. It couldn't be. Ethan Evers was way out of my league.
The living room was small, too small. The whole apartment was probably half the size of my bedroom. And as I sat there waiting for Jenna, I found myself already planning to offer her a housing allowance, just to make it less obvious. If she'd let me, I'd buy her the entire floor at her choice of luxury apartment. She deserved better than this cramped space. But all my thoughts came to a screeching halt when her bedroom door opened. My breath caught. My pulse pounded wildly in my ears. Jenna stepped out, wearing the long black dress she had picked out. The satin clung to her frame in all the right places, revealing curves I want to explore and memorize. With her heels, she was almost to my chin. Almost. Her long, wavy brown hair was swept up in a loose chignon, exposing her slender neck. A few tendrils framed her face, making her look effortlessly stunning. Simple earrings, a gold watch, and a small matching pouch completed her look. I stood up, my throat dry, and handed her a box. I had to force the words out because I didn't think she'd appreciate it if I just stood there with my jaw hanging open. "For you." She blinked, then carefully lifted the lid. Inside was a matching set of a delicate necklace, earrings, and a bracelet. The silver gleamed under the dim apartment lighting. "Ethan," her voice was barely above a whisper, eyes wide with something unreadable. "Let me." I took the necklace from the box and stepped behind her. She hesitated but lifted her chin slightly, allowing me to fasten it around her neck. My knuckles brushed against her bare skin, and she stiffened. A charge ran through me at the contact. I leaned down, my lips close to her ear. "You're so beautiful," I murmured, meaning every word. Jenna let out a soft laugh, shaking her head as she turned to face me. "That's not something you tell your secretary." I stared at her, my chest constricting in a funny, unfamiliar way. "I'm the boss, remember?" The gala was a masterpiece of elegance. Gold chandeliers, silk-draped tables, an orchestra playing soft music in the background. Not that any of it mattered. I barely noticed the extravagant decorations or the murmuring crowd. My focus was entirely on the woman beside me. Jenna. She walked with confidence, her chin tilted up slightly, her hand resting lightly on my arm. I didn't miss the way other men turned to look at her. The lingering gazes, the subtle double takes. An irrational possessiveness surged through me, an insane impulse to shield her from every hungry stare. Then a familiar voice broke through my thoughts. "I haven't seen you in a while, Ethan." I turned to see her. Camille. A woman I had once dated before realizing she was more interested in the idea of me than the reality. Scratch that. She was more interested in what I could give her. "I've been busy," I said evenly. "This is Jenna." Camille didn't even glance at her. "You should answer my calls." "I'm not obligated to." She pouted, stepping closer. "Oh, come on, Ethan. Don't be like that. Please don't disrespect my date." I didn't wait for a response. Instead, I slid Jenna's hand from my arm, laced my fingers with hers, and led her away, ignoring the stunned whispers in our wake. This wasn't how I wanted the night to go, but it wasn't too late to salvage it. After all, I had the most beautiful girl in my arm. What more could I ask for?
Who was she? I didn't ask right away, but the question burned at the back of my mind. Something about the way Ethan and Camille spoke, the weird tension between them, made me uneasy. Ethan must have noticed my silence because he led me toward the food section and said, "If you want to know something, Jenna, all you need to do is ask me." I hesitated, then asked, "Who was that woman?" "Camille, my ex." A sudden, unexpected stab of jealousy twisted in my gut. I didn't understand why. Was it because of all the things Allie had fed into my brain? That Ethan liked me? I never thought I'd be the jealous type, but here I was. Before I could dwell on it, Ethan introduced me to a group of his close friends. One of them, Justin, extended a hand to me with a wide grin. "Oh, so you're Jenna. So stoked to finally meet you." Ethan shot him a glare. "Shut up, Jess." Amused, I raised a brow. "You know me?" "How? Has he ever mentioned me?" Justin opened his mouth, then shook his head. "I would like to answer that, but I want to remain on his good side." "Thank you very much, but very nice to meet you, Jenna." Ethan wasn't kidding when he said, Justin didn't get the chance to finish because Ethan glared at him so hard that Justin held up both hands and laughed. Despite the weird encounter with the ex, the party turned out to be surprisingly fun. And maybe, just maybe, I was beginning to see Ethan in a new light.
I never had as much fun as I had tonight, especially with Jenna on my arm. I was proud of the way she handled herself, commanding the room with a look or a word. I always knew she was smart, but the way she could talk about anything, weather, stock market, current events, and fashion, all I had to do was stand and watch her, with awe and pride. She was, without a doubt, the total package. The tension was thick and palpable as I walked her to the door. She took out her key, and before she could step inside, I touched her arm lightly, but enough to make her turn around to face me. Our faces are inches apart, so close I could feel her warm breath on my skin. With my heart pounding like a fist on a drum, I brushed a knuckle along her cheek, then her jaw. She gasps at the contact, her pupils blown wide. I lowered my face to hers, grazing her lips with mine. For a moment, I convinced myself that was enough. I crossed a line I could never come back from. I pulled away just an inch, but Jenna grabbed my collar and pulled me back to her. The kiss set off explosions in my head, and when we finally broke apart, I became a different man. I was about to tell her something else when we both started at Allie's voice yelling, "Jen, is that you?" Perfect timing, but I laughed and let her go. "See you at work tomorrow." The next morning I arrived early. Too early, I barely slept, replaying the feel of Jenna's hand in mine, the way she had looked in that dress, how she had commanded the room with just a glance, and most of all, that kiss. It wasn't my first, but it might as well have been. It rearranged my DNA, and it was the only thing on my mind. When Jenna stepped into my office, she paused, eyes flicking to the desk where a full breakfast spread was laid out. Her favorite foods, all arranged neatly. Of course, I bribed the rest of the employees with their own breakfast boxes too. They weren't idiots. They knew what was happening between Jenna and me. The least I could do is be extra kind to them. She frowned. What is this? Allie told me you skipped breakfast, I said, leaning against my desk and shoving my hands deep into my pockets. Go eat. She crossed her arms. You don't tell me what to do. I could play this game all day long with her. I'm the boss, remember? Before she could retort, I closed the distance between us, reaching for her chin and tilting her face up to mine. Then, without thinking, I kissed her. Software. Slow. Deliberate. Just a taste. They could see us, Jenna breathed, but not pulling away. I pressed another kiss on her forehead. They already know. I was about to go for another kiss when a sharp knock on the door shattered the moment. I groaned, pulling back reluctantly. These interruptions are starting to piss me off. I'm going to fire the next person to do this. Jenna rested a palm on my chest and laughed. Don't you dare!
I was already halfway through changing into my pajamas when I noticed the thick folder sitting on my desk, the one Ethan had meant to take home and review. I groaned, rubbing a hand over my face. Of course, because what better way to end an already exhausting day than to have a reason to visit my boss at his place? Even if we did already kiss. Oh, God. That kiss. I mean, it's twice now, but thinking about it turned me into a pile of mush. I'd never been kissed that way. Never. Ethan knew what he was doing. It was a kiss, yes, but he might as well have set me on fire. I could have just texted him, let him know I'd bring it in the morning. But something about the idea of actually going to him for once, after all the times he'd invaded my space, was tempting. Besides, I knew where he lived. Everyone knew where Ethan Evers lived. His address was synonymous with the highest echelon of wealth in the city. I threw on a sweater over my tank top, grabbed the folder, and caught a cab. When I arrived, I had to crane my neck to take in the massive luxury high-rise. The entrance alone was grand. Glass doors, polished marble, a chandelier that probably cost more than my entire salary. Yeah, definitely not my world. I approached the reception desk, feeling out of place among the sleek decor and the well-dressed residents who barely spared me a glance. Hi, Jenna Lau. I'm here to see Ethan Evers, I said, holding the folder a little tighter. The security guard looked up, typed something into his system, then nodded. You're already on the approved visitors list, Miss Lau. I blinked. I am? He nodded again, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I wasn't sure why that made my stomach do something weird, but I pushed the thought aside as he gestured toward the elevators. Penthouse level. Mr. Evers has a private elevator. Just scan this key card, and it'll take you directly up. I sighed, shaking my head as I took the key card. Of course he does. Typical Ethan. When the elevator doors slid open, I stepped into a space that screamed luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a breathtaking cityscape, sleek modern furniture that probably cost more than my yearly rent. But before I could knock on the door, I heard voices. A woman's voice. I froze. I've been calling you for weeks, Ethan. The woman, Camille, I realized, said, frustration thick in her tone. You won't even hear me out? I heard enough the last time. Ethan's voice was controlled but firm. You need to stop showing up. I've moved on. Oh, have you? Camille scoffed. Who was that girl with you at the gala? Your latest distraction? Ethan's reply was immediate. My girlfriend. And my future wife. She'll have me. My breath caught. We never talked about us, about what we were. But deep down, I knew this was where we were headed. Camille laughed, bitter and mocking. I did some digging. She's your secretary. How cliché can you get, Ethan? His voice darkened, low and dangerous. The last time he used this tone was with George. Leave Jenna out of this, or I'll call security. There was a sharp silence before the door swung open abruptly. Camille stormed out, nearly colliding with me. Her eyes flared with recognition, and she sneered. He'll get tired of you, you know. I lifted my chin, giving her the sweetest, most scathing smile I could muster. That's funny, I said smoothly. He got tired of you first. The flash of hurt in her eyes was almost too satisfying.
My breath caught the second I saw Jenna standing in the doorway. My pulse pounded as I took in the way the city lights behind her cast a soft glow around her figure, making her seem almost unreal. My mind raced. How much had she heard? Jenna, I took a step forward, my voice gruff. But she only tilted her head, a knowing smile playing at her lips. It's not what I think, she supplied, arching a brow. My shoulders relaxed slightly. Yeah. Well, that's a relief, she murmured, hugging the folder in her arms. Because I heard everything. Something loosened in my chest, but at the same time, something else tightened. Something raw and dangerous that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. I took another step toward her, slow, deliberate. Then you know what I said wasn't a lie. Jenna's lips parted slightly, but she held my gaze, unflinching. The part where I'm your girlfriend? She asked, voice softer now. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. That part, and the part where I've moved on. My fingers twitched at my sides, aching to reach for her. With you. Jenna exhaled shakily, her grip on the folder loosening. Good, she whispered. I didn't hesitate. I cupped her face and kissed her, slow and deep, pouring weeks of tension, frustration, and unspoken desire into it. Jenna melted against me, her hands sliding up my chest, grasping at my shirt like she never wanted to let go. When we finally pulled apart, she blinked up at me, dazed. I smirked. I hope you weren't just here for work, Jenna laughed, shaking her head. You don't tell me what to do. I'm the boss, remember? I teased before pulling her in again. I love you, Jenna. She burrowed her face into my chest. I love you too, Ethan.